She packed the cooler herself that morning. 2 bottles of champagne. A wheel of Brie. A jar of olives she had special ordered from a shop in Connecticut. She arranged them carefully, the way a woman arranges things she wants someone to see, things she wants to be remembered for. She also packed a notarized form she had signed the week before. A form designed to transfer everything my father had ever built. Every ship, every contract, every sunrise over the harbor, into her name. The moment I was declared dead, the yacht left the marina at noon. My stepsister sat at the bow and did not look at me once during the entire first hour. The water was flat and green and 74 degrees.
My father would have said that without even checking.
He always knew. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where quiet women with good lawyers always get the last word. If you haven't joined the family yet, hit that subscribe button. This one is worth every minute. My name is Mila Whitmore, and what I'm about to tell you is the true story of the afternoon my stepmother tried to kill me, and how, because of one man who planned ahead and one stranger who pulled me out of the ocean, she is now sitting in a prison cell while I sit in my father's chair. My father's name was Garrett Whitmore. He did not inherit what he had. He built it. One tugboat. A borrowed slip at a municipal dock. 14-hour days that smelled like diesel and salt water and something he never named, but wore like a second skin. By the time I was 12, his company managed cargo routing for half the commercial traffic on the eastern seaboard below Norfolk. By the time I was 18, we had moved into the house on Brie Point. White clapboard, wraparound porch. A view of the harbor where his boats came and went all day like the tide. Reliable, powerful, always returning. My mother died when I was 11. Ovarian cancer. She went in 14 months, which is both a very long time and no time at all. My father spent the next 7 years raising me alone. That meant I grew up on docks, in tugboat wheelhouses, in the back rows of maritime arbitration hearings where I did my algebra homework while lawyers argued about cargo insurance. I didn't know it then, but I was receiving the best education of my life. I was learning how the world actually works, through evidence, through documentation, through the quiet precision of men who knew that every line drawn on a contract has consequences. He married Colleen when I was 18. She was an event planner from Bridgeport who had organized a fundraiser for the harbor master's retirement. She was 40, well-dressed, and very skilled at making a room feel like everyone in it had been personally invited. My father liked that about her. He had spent 30 years talking to longshoremen and port captains and did not know how to throw a dinner party. She brought her daughter, Jana, 16 years old. Quiet in the way that children become quiet when they have learned that silence is safer than speaking. They moved into the house. My father expanded the guest wing to accommodate them. And every year after that, he took all of us on the annual yacht trip, his tradition since my 12th birthday, when he chartered a 38-footer and let me steer for 20 minutes with his hands over mine on the wheel. My father trusted 2 people with the complete details of his estate. Me and Howard Kessler, his attorney since before I was born. Howard was the kind of man who answered his phone on the second ring at 9 in the evening and billed in 6-minute increments because he believed that precision was a form of respect. My father died 3 years ago. Heart attack at his desk. One hand on a shipping manifest. The other on a cup of coffee that was still warm when his secretary found him. He went the way he lived, mid-sentence, in motion, surrounded by the work he loved. At the will reading, Colleen sat across from Howard in a black dress she had bought the day before. I could tell it was new, the tag was still tucked inside the collar. Howard read the provisions exactly as my father had arranged them. I received the controlling interest in the company through an irrevocable trust he had established 10 years earlier, when he was 53 and in perfect health. The trust was managed by Howard and included what the legal documents called a spendthrift clause, which meant no one could pledge, sell, or transfer my interest. Not by negotiation. Not by court order. Colleen received the right to live in the house on Brie Point for as long as she wished, and a monthly stipend of $12,000 drawn from a separate account. She received nothing else. She looked at Howard the way you look at someone who has moved your furniture while you were sleeping. "That's it," she said. Howard closed the folder. "That is the entirety of the distribution." Colleen did not cry. She did not raise her voice. She stood, straightened the hem of her new dress, and walked out of the office. Jana followed. Neither of them said goodbye. In the months after the will reading, Colleen began redecorating the house. Small changes first. New curtains in the dining room. A different rug in the foyer. I told myself it was grief, the instinct to rearrange your surroundings when you can no longer rearrange the thing that has gone wrong. Then the changes grew larger. My childhood photographs came down from the staircase wall. My mother's watercolors, quiet, careful paintings she had made during the years she was well, were replaced with abstract prints Colleen ordered from a catalog. The lock on the wine cellar was changed. The lock on the linen closet was changed. I did not say anything about any of it. My father had wanted her in that house, and I was honoring his wishes, the way you hold a door open for someone even when the wind is working against you. But by March, Colleen had hired her own attorney. I found out because he sent a letter to Howard. Howard called me that afternoon. 3 words. She's making moves. Howard explained it that evening. Colleen's attorney had filed an inquiry with the county probate office about challenging the trust on grounds of undue influence. The claim was that my father had not been of sound mind when he established it, and that I had pressured him into excluding Colleen from meaningful inheritance. The irony was almost architectural. My father had created that trust 10 years before he died, during a period when he had just passed a full physical examination, renewed his pilot's license for a Cessna, and personally negotiated a 9-figure cargo contract with a European shipping consortium. Any judge who reviewed the creation date would dismiss the challenge before lunch. I asked Howard if we should worry. The trust is ironclad, he said. But I've been doing this 40 years, Mila. When legal options run out, people get creative. I did not fully understand what he meant at the time. I understand it now. In the weeks that followed, Colleen became warmer. She started cooking dinner on Sunday evenings, roast chicken, potatoes, a salad dressed with a good olive oil. She suggested a spa weekend for the 3 of us. She began calling me sweetheart in the hallway, which she had never done before. She brought me coffee every morning for 2 weeks straight. Same cup, same time, same smile. She set it on the counter and said, "Good morning, sweetheart," and waited, always waited, until I took a sip before she left the kitchen. I noticed the change. I thought she was accepting reality. I thought grief had finally softened her. Looking back, I should have seen the pattern. Every act of warmth was a measurement. She was calculating, with the precision of a woman who had spent her career building atmospheres for other people's events, how much trust she needed to construct before she could spend it all in a single afternoon. She wasn't becoming kind. She was becoming ready. In late May, Colleen suggested the annual yacht trip. We had not done one since my father's death. She brought it up gently over Sunday dinner, the way she did everything in those weeks, softly, like something offering itself rather than asking. "It's been 3 years since your father passed," she said. "Let us do it right this time. Just the 3 of us, you, me, and Jana." Jana looked up from her plate. Something crossed her face. Not quite fear. Not quite recognition. It was gone before I could name it. I told myself it was nothing. I said yes. I said yes because my father loved that trip more than any tradition he ever kept. Because the first time he let me steer that boat, I was 12 years old, and his hands were warm over mine, and the harbor spread out in front of us like a future. I was not ready to let it die. The morning of the trip, I packed a canvas bag with sunscreen, a novel I had been meaning to finish since February, and my father's old compass. It was a brass Brunton he had bought in 1989 from a retired merchant captain in Galveston. The man had told him, "It won't tell you where to go. It tells you which way you're already facing." My father carried it on every voyage after that. I had carried it in my jacket pocket since the day he died. It was heavy, brass and glass, and the needle had been pointing north since before I was born. At the marina, the yacht was already prepared. Colleen had arrived early. She was standing on the dock in white linen pants and a new gold watch I had not seen before. Thin band, expensive silence. The cooler was at her feet, packed and buckled. 2 crew members waited on the stern deck. I did not recognize either of them. "Where is Captain Engel?" I asked. Engel had captained the Whitmore yacht for 11 years. He knew the hull the way a doctor knows a patient. On vacation, Colleen said. I hired replacements. They came highly recommended. The two men nodded at me without introducing themselves. One was stocky, with a sunburn that looked painful. The other wore mirrored sunglasses that reflected the dock behind me like a warning I almost read. Neither wore a uniform. Neither wore a name tag. I stepped aboard. Jana was already on the bow, sitting in one of the cushioned chairs with her phone in her hands. She did not look up when I boarded. She did not say good morning. The only acknowledgement I received was the slight shift of her shoulders, the adjustment of someone who knows they are being watched and has decided not to be the one who speaks first. The first hour was unremarkable. We motored south along the coast. The sun was high, and the wind was light, and the water was flat enough that you could see the reflection of the hull running beneath us like a shadow. Colleen opened the champagne at 2 in the afternoon and poured 3 glasses. She raised hers. To family, she said. I drank.
Jana drank. The champagne was cold and very dry.
I checked the compass once out of habit. The needle pointed north. We were heading south-southeast along the coast, toward a stretch of coves my father used to anchor in. I thought for just a moment that it was going to be all right. We anchored at 6:30 in a cove I did not recognize. This was the first thing that registered incorrectly, though I did not register it as wrong until later. My father had anchored in these waters for 20 years. I knew every inlet from memory. This cove, the angle of the rocks, the particular quiet of it was not familiar. Colleen poured the last glass of champagne and carried it to where I was standing at the stern rail. The water below was dark and very still. Beautiful evening, she said, and her voice was the same voice it had always been. Warm, even, effortlessly social. The voice of a woman who had spent her career making other people feel at ease. She leaned in close enough that I could smell the Brie on her breath. And she whispered something I will never forget. Her hand hit the center of my back before the last word left her mouth. The stern rail gave. Not the way a railing bends under unexpected weight. The way a railing moves when the bolts holding it have been loosened and reattached with hardware that was never meant to hold. It was not a failure. It was a design. I went over backwards. The water was not cold. That was the first thing I registered. 74 degrees. My father always knew the temperature of any body of water within 2 degrees. He had said it so many times that the number lived in me like a reflex. The second thing I registered was the sound of the engine accelerating. They were not turning around. I surfaced. Salt burned my eyes. The stern of the yacht was already 30 yards away and pulling farther. I could see Janice standing at the rail, looking down at the water where I had been. She did not throw a life ring. She did not scream for help. She stood there for 3 full seconds, looking at the exact place I had disappeared, and then she turned and walked inside the cabin and closed the door behind her. The wake rocked me twice, and then the water flattened. I was alone. The sky was going from orange to purple at the edges. The first stars were beginning to show. My shoes were heavy. I kicked them off, and they sank. My phone was in my back pocket, ruined on impact. My father's compass was in my front pocket. Brass and glass and a needle that had been pointing north since 1989. It was heavy. I kept it anyway. I treaded water and looked toward shore. A dark line with scattered lights. 2 miles, maybe less. My father had taught me to swim in the harbor when I was 5 years old. He said the daughter of a captain who could not swim was a liability, and he did not raise liabilities. I started swimming. After 20 minutes, the cramp hit my left calf. I rolled onto my back and floated and waited for it to pass. The sky above me was enormous. I thought about my father. I thought about how he would have checked the rail bolts himself before every trip, because that was the kind of man he was, the kind who understood that preparation is not pessimism, it is respect for everything that can go wrong. I thought about Colleen's whisper. I thought about Jana closing the door. Then I saw lights. Moving lights low on the water. A trawler. A voice over a loudspeaker. You in the water? Stay where you are. Captain Dale Buchanan was 71 years old, a Vietnam veteran, and he pulled me aboard with a boat hook and a grip that could have bent rebar. You fall off a party boat? He asked. Something like that, I said. He handed me a wool blanket that smelled like fish and diesel, poured coffee from a thermos into a steel mug, and pointed me toward a bench bolted to the deck near the wheelhouse. The trawler was not comfortable. Nets stacked on the stern, rust spots on the cleats, a radio crackling with static in the cabin. But it was solid. It was above the waterline. And after the last hour of my life, that was enough. He handed me a satellite phone the size of a brick. I called Howard Kessler. He answered on the second ring, which told me he was still at his desk at 9 in the evening, which told me nothing about Howard had changed in 34 years. Mila. I'm alive. Colleen pushed me off the yacht. Silence. 5 seconds. 5 seconds is a long time for a man who bills in 6-minute increments. Where are you? He said. I looked at Dale. Dale looked at his GPS display and read off the coordinates. Howard repeated them back without writing them down. Then he said the words that changed everything. Do not call anyone else. Not the police. Not Colleen. Not Jana. Not yet.
Why?
Because right now, Colleen believes you are dead. If she believes you are dead, she will make moves. She will file claims. She will contact her attorney. She will try to access what she thinks she can access. He paused. And every move she makes in the next 48 hours will be documented evidence of criminal intent. I understood. My father had trusted Howard for 40 years. There was a reason. Give me 48 hours, Howard said. I will have everything we need. I hung up and looked at Dale. He was leaning against the wheelhouse door with his arms crossed, not pretending he hadn't heard. Someone tried to hurt you, he said. It was not a question.
Yes.
You need to be invisible for a couple of days. He nodded once, slow and certain. I spent 14 months invisible in a jungle outside Da Nang. 2 days on a fishing boat is nothing. He went back to the wheelhouse without another word. I sat on the bench with a blanket around my shoulders and my father's compass in my hand. The brass was warm from my pocket. The needle was steady. I held it and watched the coast lights, and did not sleep for a long time. What I am about to tell you is what Howard told me 48 hours later, after his forensic accountant and his retired investigator had finished documenting every move Colleen made while she believed I was at the bottom of the ocean. The timeline was precise. Howard liked precision. 7 the next morning, 12 hours after I went into the water, Colleen called the Coast Guard to report me missing at sea. 12 hours. She waited 12 hours before calling anyone. At 7:42, she called her attorney. By 9:15, he had filed an emergency petition with the county court, seeking control of estate assets on behalf of Colleen as the sole surviving next of kin. At 11:30, Colleen called the insurance company. This was the first of 3 calls she made that day. There were 3 life insurance policies naming Colleen as the sole beneficiary. Not policies my father had taken out. Policies Colleen had quietly taken out on me over the past 14 months. Total payout if I was declared dead, $4.2 million. 2 of those policies were less than 6 months old. She had been building toward this for over a year. Howard called again the second morning. His investigator had found something I did not know about. For over a year, Colleen had been meeting with a second attorney, not Pritchard, who had filed the probate challenge. This one specialized in trust litigation. Beneath the legal challenge Howard had already dismissed as meritless, Colleen had been preparing a forged codicil to my father's will. A document that would have added her as a co-beneficiary of the irrevocable trust, entitled to 50% of all distributions upon my death. It was dated 18 months before my father died. It was notarized by a third party. It was witnessed by 2 names Howard did not recognize. The notarization date conflicted with my father's travel records. He was in Rotterdam the day it was supposedly signed. It was poorly done, Howard said, but it was done. It had been sitting in a drawer in Colleen's attorney's office, waiting for the right moment. The right moment was the moment I was declared dead. She has given us everything we need, Howard said. Time to come home. The house on Brie Point looked the same from the road. White clapboard, dark shutters. The wraparound porch my father had built the summer I turned 14, because my mother had always wanted one, and he hadn't gotten around to it while she was alive. From the driveway, I could see two changes. The porch furniture was new, gray, and modern, nothing my father would have chosen. And my mother's rocking chair was gone. It had sat in the same spot on the porch for 22 years. White paint chipped at the armrests where she used to grip while watching his boats come into the harbor. Now there was a potted plant in its place. I was wearing borrowed clothes from Captain Dale. A flannel shirt 2 sizes too large, work jeans held up with a length of dock line. My hair was stiff with salt. I hadn't showered in 2 days. Howard's car was already in the driveway. I walked to the front door. I did not knock. It was my house. I used the second key, the one my father had pressed into my hand when I was 21, and said, "Keep this somewhere she can't find it." At the time, I thought he meant burglars. I now understood he did not. The hallway smelled like cedar. My father's closet, the one Colleen had never touched, because she said the smell reminded her of him. It was the one honest thing she ever said about my father. I walked to the living room doorway. Uncle Martin was on the sofa, with a coffee cup halfway to his mouth. He saw me first. The cup stopped. He didn't put it down. He didn't stand up. He looked at me with an expression I have never seen on a grown man's face before, the look of someone watching a person walk out of somewhere they were not supposed to come back from. Colleen was mid-sentence, talking to Martin about memorial arrangements. White lilies, she was saying. Something about white lilies. She turned. Her mouth was still forming the word. She saw me standing in the doorway in a dead man's flannel shirt, salt in my hair, my father's compass in my hand. Her mouth closed. Nobody spoke for approximately 7 seconds. I counted them the way my father used to count seconds between lightning and thunder, not for precision but for something to hold on to. I walked to my father's armchair. The one Colleen had not moved because it weighed 140 pounds. I sat down. Howard entered the room behind me. He was carrying a manila envelope. Howard placed the documents on the coffee table one by one, with the quiet precision of a man who had been preparing this moment for 48 hours and was not going to rush it now. The first document, 3 life insurance policies, taken out by Colleen over the past 14 months, naming herself as the sole beneficiary. Total payout upon my death, $4.2 million. The second, the emergency petition Colleen's attorney had filed 4 hours after reporting me missing, seeking control of estate assets as the sole surviving next of kin. The third, the forged codicil, notarized on a date when my father's travel records placed him in Rotterdam, 4,000 miles away. The fourth, the Coast Guard incident report. Time of incident, approximately 7 in the evening. Time of report filed, 7 the following morning. A 12-hour gap that no grieving wife could adequately explain. Howard placed his fountain pen on the table and clicked it closed. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, "the trust your husband established is irrevocable and contains a spendthrift provision. Even if Mila had died, the assets would have transferred to the Garrett Whitmore Maritime Foundation. Not to you. Not to anyone in this room." He paused. "The insurance claims are fraudulent. The codicil is forged. And the Coast Guard has been notified of the 12-hour reporting delay." Colleen's face did not show anger. It did not show fear. It showed something I did not have a word for then, and still don't, the expression of someone who realizes, in the space of a single sentence, that they have destroyed their life for something they were never going to get. Jana came downstairs 20 minutes after Howard finished speaking. She did not walk into the living room. She sat on the bottom step of the staircase, which put her in the hallway with a clear view of everything, but outside its perimeter, as though she had not yet decided whether she belonged inside or outside of what was happening. Her eyes were red. She was picking at the carpet on the step, pulling at a single fiber with her thumbnail, a gesture I had seen 100 times when she was 19 and Colleen was furious about something. It was the gesture of a person who had learned to make herself small. "I knew about the yacht," she said. She was looking at the floor. "She told me the morning of. She said we were going to scare you. She said you would agree to modify the trust, that you'd be frightened enough to give her a larger share. She said we would come back and everything would go back to normal." She paused. "I didn't know about the railing. When you went over the side, she told me to go below. She said it was an accident. She said you would swim to shore. She said people swim to shore all the time. And you went below? I said. Yes. And you poured yourself a glass of champagne. Jana looked up at me for the first time. Her face was not defiant. It was not apologetic. It was the face of someone who has just heard the truest sentence ever spoken about them and has nothing to put against it. I know, she said. I did not forgive her. I was not ready for that, and I was not certain I would ever be. But I looked at her sitting on the bottom step of a staircase she had never chosen, in a house that had never been hers, picking at carpet on the floor of a life her mother had built around her like a wall. You are 34 years old, Jana, I said. At some point, your mother stops being an explanation. She nodded. She did not argue. She went back upstairs. It was the first time I had ever seen her nod without looking at Colleen first. Howard made 3 phone calls from the dining room with the door open. I could hear every word. I knew Howard intended it that way. The first call was to his office. He instructed his paralegal to prepare a criminal referral to the district attorney's office for the following morning. Insurance fraud, 3 counts. Forgery of a testamentary document, 1 count. Reckless endangerment, 1 count. The second call was to the trust administration line at the bank holding Colleen's stipend account. Howard cited the trust's material breach of good faith clause and directed the bank to suspend all distributions, effective immediately. Attempted physical harm to the sole beneficiary, he explained, qualified as a material breach under any reasonable interpretation of the provision. The third call was to a property management firm. Howard requested a formal 30-day notice to vacate, addressed to Colleen Whitmore, for the residence at Brie Point. 3 calls. 9 minutes. Colleen sat on the edge of the sofa and listened to her world get smaller with every sentence Howard spoke. Money. Home. Legal standing. Each call removed a layer. The way you take apart a stage set after the show is closed and the lights have gone down, and there is nothing left but the sound of folding chairs on a bare floor. Colleen came out of my father's study 6 minutes after Pritchard left. She stood in the doorway with her chin up and her back straight, the way she always stood when she wanted you to know she was not afraid. But her hands were shaking. They were the only honest part of her. She looked at me and said something I did not expect. Your father chose you over me every single day for 18 years. Even after he died, he chose you. She did not deny what she had done. She did not apologize. She stood in the frame of my father's study door, surrounded by his maritime law books on shelves she had never touched, and she said what she had apparently been thinking for a very long time. I was 40 years old when I married your father. I was an event planner from Bridgeport who decorated other people's parties. I walked into this house and I thought, finally, I am somewhere. And then he died, and I found out I was a guest. I was always a guest. I listened. I did not interrupt. Not because I owed her the courtesy, but because I wanted to understand what a person tells themselves to justify pushing someone into the ocean. She finished. She waited for me to argue. I stood up. Colleen, I said, I understand that you felt you had nothing. But you had a stipend. You had a home. You had a stepdaughter who kept your lights on because her father asked her to. I paused. What you did not have was enough. It is never enough for people like you. I watched her understand that this was not the beginning of a negotiation. It was the end of one. I walked through the house alone after Howard finished his calls. Through the dining room with its new curtains I had not chosen. Through the kitchen where she had made me coffee for 2 weeks with a smile that was never a smile. Through the back door and into the garage. My mother's rocking chair was there, behind the snowblower, under a green tarp. Dust on the seat. Cobwebs on the armrests where the white paint had chipped from years of her gripping them while she watched the harbor. I had never seen it without her hands on it until she was gone. I pulled the tarp off. I carried the chair through the back door, through the kitchen, through the front hallway, and out to the porch. I set it down in the same spot where it had sat for 22 years. It wasn't a dramatic gesture. It wasn't a statement. It was just putting something back where it belonged. I sat down. The boards creaked under the runners. Salt air came off the harbor. The compass was in my pocket. I did not take it out. I did not need to check which way I was facing. The notary who had certified the forged codicil was 26 years old, frightened and cooperative. She provided text messages from Colleen arranging their meeting, photographs of the cash payment, $2,000 counted out on her kitchen table, and a recording she had made on her phone during the transaction.
She said she made it just in case.
Howard told me about it over the phone. Colleen told her it was just a formality, he said. That the family had all agreed. That no one would ever look at it twice.
He paused.
People usually believe the $2,000. The district attorney reviewed the full evidence package and filed charges. Insurance fraud, 3 counts. Forgery of a testamentary document, 1 count. Reckless endangerment, 1 count. The attempted murder charge, Howard explained, was more difficult to prove. The physical evidence of the railing tampering was circumstantial, and the 2 replacement crew members had vanished. One had been traced to a marina in South Carolina, working under a different name. The other had not been found. Legitimate crew do not get paid in cash and disappear, Howard noted. Captain Dale Buchanan provided a written statement to the district attorney. His testimony about finding me in open water, my physical condition, the timeline, the absence of any distress call from the yacht, corroborated everything. Colleen took the plea deal on a Wednesday morning. 5 years. Eligible for parole after 3. Insurance fraud, forgery, reckless endangerment, concurrent sentences. I found out at lunch. I finished my sandwich. Then I called Howard and thanked him. Then I went back to work. Some things do not require a ceremony. They only require an ending. Jana called me the evening the sentencing was confirmed. She had found a studio apartment in Portland. She had gotten a job at a design studio, her first real one, chosen by her and not Colleen. She had been doing graphic design work for years in private. Brand identities. Packaging. Clean, confident work that her mother had never allowed her to show anyone because she said Whitmore women didn't need to work. I lead with the branding pieces, she told me. Good, I said. She was quiet for a moment. I know you don't owe me anything, Mila. I know, I said. Good luck in Portland. I meant it. Not warmly. Not coldly. Factually, the way my father would have said it. Some bridges are not built with warmth. They are built with the honest acknowledgement that the person on the other side has the capacity to cross. 6 months later, I activated the Garrett Whitmore Maritime Foundation. The trust's successor beneficiary clause had designated it as the recipient in the event of my death. But I was alive. I activated it because my father had built it into the structure of his estate for a reason, and because I finally understood what that reason was. The foundation funded maritime safety training for commercial fishing crews along the coast. Emergency protocols, equipment maintenance, weather navigation, open water survival. The kind of training where the difference between knowing and not knowing is the difference between a father coming home or not. The first scholarship was named after Captain Dale Buchanan. He attended the ceremony in his only suit, navy, slightly too big in the shoulders, and shook my hand with the same grip that had pulled me out of the water. Your father and I never met, he said. But I think we would have gotten along. He would have asked about your boat first, I said. He always asked about the boat first. Dale smiled. It was the first time I had seen him smile. That evening, I sat on the porch in my mother's rocking chair. The harbor spread below the house the way it always had. The way it had when she watched it, when he counted its lights. The way it would long after I was gone, and someone else sat in this chair and looked at the same water. I took out the compass and opened it. The needle swung. A small hesitation, the way a compass needle does when it is recalibrating after being moved. Then it settled north. My father said once that a compass does not tell you where to go. It tells you which way you are already facing. I had carried that sentence in my head for years before I understood it. He was not talking about navigation. He was talking about knowing who you are before someone else tries to tell you. I closed the compass and put it back in my pocket. The harbor lights came on one at a time, the way they did every evening at this latitude, this time of year. I counted them the way my father counted them. 7,
8, 9,
10. All on. None missing. The rocking chair creaked on the porch boards. The boards my father had nailed himself. Salt air moved through the screens. The stars were showing, not all of them, just the first ones, bright enough to cut through the harbor light. I did not count anything else. There was nothing left to count. Thank you for staying with me through this one. If Mila's story reminded you that preparation is the truest form of protection, or if it made you think about the people who quietly have your back when it matters most, I would love to hear about it in the comments below. And if you haven't already, take a moment to subscribe. There are more stories linked in the description. Every single one of them is about someone who refused to disappear. I'll see you in the next one.